This week on Government Matters.
Every traveler that spends part of the process working through technology frees up our officers to engage them and do their individualized risk assessment with their law enforcement training. So these things work in tandem.
The Department of Homeland Security calls pre-clearance a security imperative and an economic opportunity. We get a progress report.
Congress wants to see more transparency here. They also voice concern that DIUx isn't really getting to the heart of issues with DoD acquisition.
Secretary Ash Carter wants Silicon Valley to inject DoD with a healthy dose of innovation. But Congress wants more foundation for his Defense Innovation Unit experimental.
So in every single one of those instances, a senior federal official in government will need to have a good idea of how they want to make those decisions well, effectively, and efficiently.
In January, a new administration will move into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. They'll need to make decisions that just can't wait. Government Matters starts right now.
From ABC 7 and News Channel 8, this is Government Matters.
To our viewers around the world on the American Forces Network and here in the nation's capital, thanks for joining us. Government is the engine that runs this city. That's why Government Matters. Every week we'll bring you the top headlines in tech, security, and management. I'm your host, Morris Jones. Last December, Juniper Networks announced a malicious code had been placed in its Screen OS software. Days later, they gave the intelligence community and 12 federal agencies an emergency security patch. Congressman Will Hurd says 3 agencies, including Treasury, took more than 50 days to install it. Amy Aubert has the latest from Capitol Hill.
Cybersecurity, an issue driving recent discussions across the nation's capital.
And we cannot stand idly by while this happens.
House IT Subcommittee Chairman Will Hurd says Wednesday's hearing is just the starting line.
Various international groups and state-sponsored actors are constantly attempting to steal military secrets and expose the personally identifiable information of American citizens.
Threat Connect CIO Richard Barger says it's an issue that affects everyone.
You think about, consider how technology permeates every aspect of our lives, from how we work, live, and play. And so there's really no way of getting around it. Everything we do is, in our back pocket, in our purse, from our mobile devices.
Barger says we need to pay more attention and make cybersecurity a top priority because there's always room for improvement.
You go to war with the army you have and the solutions that you have.
The hearing also focused on an announcement from Juniper Networks last year. Hurd says the company revealed that a malicious code was placed in some of their software. He called it a gaping vulnerability in federal networks.
This particular vulnerability may have allowed outside actors to monitor network traffic, potentially decrypt information, and even take control of firewalls.
In a statement provided to Government Matters, a Juniper spokesperson stressed the importance of communication. Quote, upon the issuance of a security advisory, Juniper Networks works closely with our customers, including those in the public sector, to raise awareness about the security advisories and the need for action.
This is just one sophisticated example of the attacks that U.S. companies and the federal clients face on a daily basis.
To counter those attacks, the panelists emphasized strategies to train and prepare for cyber threats, protections, and a safe zone between PII and the internet.
It's core to what we do across public and private sector and needs to be better understood because it has real-world implications.
For Government Matters, I'm Amy Aubert.
Let's take a look now at some other names making news. The Senate has approved Washington lawyer Michael Missel as Inspector General for the Department of Veterans Affairs. President Obama nominated Missel in October. The agency has been without an IG for more than 2 years. FCW reports Major General George Franz will head back to Cyber Command. He'll serve as the Director of Operations as Cybercom steps up digital efforts against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Federal News Radio reports EPA Chief Technology Officer Greg Godbout is headed to the private sector. He'll join the team at a company called Seabrain. They developed a new software architecture in concert with the Danish government. Godbout was a Presidential Innovation Fellow and co-founded 18F. In Tech Matters, the pre-clearance program. The Department of Homeland Security calls pre-clearance a security imperative and an economic opportunity. Here's how it works. Each traveler undergoes immigration, customs, and agriculture inspections before boarding a direct flight to the United States. Last May, DHS announced plans to expand pre-clearance from 15 to 25 airports. For a progress report, I'm joined by Kevin McAleenan, Deputy Commissioner at U.S. Customs and Border Protection and winner of a 2016 Presidential Rank Award. Kevin, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's start with the pre-clearance program. Where is it today, and where are you taking it?
Well, today we're in 15 airports in 6 countries globally, in Canada, the Caribbean, and in the United Arab Emirates. And where we'd like to take it is to additional hubs servicing the United States in Europe and Asia.
Now, earlier this month, you were in Hawaii talking about the possibility of implementing a pre-clearance facility at the Narita International Airport in Tokyo. Why is that site so important?
Narita is the second largest last point of departure to the United States. Almost 5 million travelers a year from Narita, and Hawaii is one of the key states where we have lots of travelers from Japan and lots of connecting flights coming through Narita.
Is that going to be an easy step, or is that going to be difficult like some of these other airports might be?
Well, with the larger airport, you're looking at how to handle the logistics, how to get travelers from their connecting flight in an expeditious manner so that they can benefit from pre-clearance. So when they land in the United States, they get to go directly to their destination or to a connecting flight without going through an additional process.
Makes a lot of sense. Now let's talk about Abu Dhabi for a moment. You implemented pre-clearance there in January of 2014. Since then, CBP has intercepted nearly 600 people deemed inadmissible to the U.S. Who are these people?
Actually, those numbers have gone up to several thousand at this point in our process.
I would think so, yeah.
So those folks are individuals that aren't going to be admissible from an immigration perspective to the United States. They might have had a prior issue, an overstay on a previous trip, or they may present a security threat, a small number of them. Either way, we're able to interview them, inspect their luggage, and address the threat before they board the aircraft.
Now, you also led the automation of the DHS arrival and departure record, a form used by more than 25 million travelers a year. Now your agency captures that information electronically. How does it work?
So we're working hard to create a much better passenger experience where they're involved in the process, where it's seamless and paperless. So what we do is we take the information that they're already providing the airlines and use that as their immigration arrival information. We're also trying to involve travelers using touchscreens and mobile devices to go through the administrative process of their arrival, so that when they greet a CBP officer, they can do a quick, focused interview and they can move on to their destination, as most travelers are welcome to the United States.
Now, Kevin, next week your agency will host a Homeland Security Day in Silicon Valley. What role do they play in all of these initiatives?
Well, we're trying to present complex and interesting problems. We have a very vast mission with a number of complexities, and we're trying to innovate to keep up with changing threats and expanding volumes. So we thought we'd go to the heart of innovation and present some of these ideas and challenges and see what we can do in conjunction with the top technology experts in the world, and also find innovative ways to partner with them on streamlined procurements and ongoing efforts.
Now let's talk about motivation. One reason you joined CBP is because you wanted to be part of the solution after 9/11. Those attacks changed air travel forever. We all know that. Today, many flyers board a plane with some degree of trepidation. You've spent the past few years trying to make the travel experience safer and easier for people entering and re-entering the U.S. Is part of your motivation to make flying fun again?
I think it would be ideal that our process is the most secure in the world and still world-class in terms of welcoming travelers to the United States, both our returning citizens and visitors that are so critical to our U.S. economy. So yes, we've tried to take all of our security enhancements and build on them with additional technology options so we can facilitate that traveler as well. Every traveler that spends part of the process working through technology frees up our officers to engage them and do their individualized risk assessment with their law enforcement training. So these things work in tandem. It's a better process, more welcoming, and more secure at the same time.
Good luck. It sounds like a program that is something we need, particularly during this political year when so many people are critical of people coming to the U.S. It sounds like you're on track to make it successful. Kevin McAleenan, Deputy Commissioner at U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
To maintain a technological edge over potential adversaries, the Pentagon turned to Silicon Valley. Defense Secretary Ash Carter opened one experimental unit with plans for more. The question, will Congress give him the green light? We have the latest straight ahead on Government Matters. In security matters, the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental. In August, Defense Secretary Ash Carter opened DIUx in the heart of Silicon Valley. The goal was to engage DoD with the startup community to innovate and transition to new technologies and business practices. DIUx is already bearing fruit. In March, the Pentagon announced 22 pilot projects, but funding could be a concern. Joining me with the latest is Tony Bertuca, Chief Editor at Inside the Pentagon. All right, Tony, refresh our collective memories. What is the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental? How does it differ from DARPA, for example?
Well, the DIUx bills itself as the Match.com of Pentagon acquisition. Their job is to perform outreach with promising commercial technology companies in Silicon Valley and see if they can make a match somewhere in DoD. Their mission is smaller than DARPA's. DARPA is a $3 billion organization. Their job is to actually turn screws on promising technology and develop new leap-ahead capabilities. It's a little bit different.
All right, makes sense. Good comparison, too. You write that DIUx is pegged for $30 million a year between fiscal years 2017 and 2021. What would that money pay for?
Well, right now it pays for the Silicon Valley team and its facility there, but the money for later years would go to stand up additional units. There's one that they plan on announcing sometime this summer in Boston. Other cities that they're considering with robust technology corridors, Boston, I said Boston, Seattle, Cincinnati. I also think Austin, Texas is in the mix.
The plan ran into a roadblock just this week in the House Armed Services Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee. What happened?
Well, the committee is considering legislation that would limit funding for DIUx, about 20% of it, until the Defense Department produces a very detailed report about where the money's going, what type of outreach is being executed. Congress wants to see more transparency here. They also voiced concern that DIUx isn't really getting to the heart of issues with DoD acquisition. Contractors often complain that it's a long bureaucratic system with a lot of barriers.
Now, Tony, lawmakers aren't the only ones concerned about how commercial companies do business with the Pentagon. Silicon Valley CEOs say the acquisition process needs to be revamped. Tell us more about that.
Well, a panel of CEOs participated in a roundtable discussion at the Atlantic Council last week, and they all said they appreciate the DIUx, they appreciate the Pentagon and the new outreach efforts, but they said their problem is not with outreach, their problem is with the system itself. In fact, one CEO went as far as to say that they don't make reference of any government sales when pitching potential investors because venture capitalists just don't want to hear about government and government work. So I think there's a lot that has to be done in terms of becoming a stronger partnership there.
Now, before you go, put all of this into context for us. Carter wants to innovate and experiment, but Congress wants him to lay a solid foundation for DIUx. Are these goals entirely at odds with one another?
The two sides do not say they're at odds with each other. In fact, Congress says that they appreciate the DIUx, they are supportive of the efforts, but they want more transparency. They want to know where the money's going. They also want to, I think, bring attention to the fact that there is a lot of trouble with the DoD acquisition system in terms of regulation. And in the legislation they're considering, they use the word moats, that there are moats in the way of commercial technology companies from wanting to do business with DoD. DoD, on the other hand, I do not believe is at odds with Congress. I just think it's a matter of them coming together to try to be more transparent.
Tony Bertuca, Chief Editor at Inside the Pentagon. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
For top federal officials, decisions can be complicated. One directive made in the Oval Office can mean the difference between disaster and recovery or life and death. We talk decision framework straight ahead on Government Matters. In Management Matters, decisions. On January 20th, the next president will have to make plenty of them right away. That takes planning. This year, there's a great deal of focus, at least in the federal community, on making a smooth transition. But what about decision-making itself? This week, the Partnership for Public Service and the IBM Center for the Business of Government published a new report. Its goal is to help leaders make smart and timely decisions. For more, I'm joined by Tom Fox, Vice President for Leadership and Innovation at the Partnership for Public Service. Tom, let's start with a simple definition. We're talking about decision frameworks. What does that mean? Give us a few examples.
Sure. So when you think about a new federal leader coming into office after an election, there are different types of decisions they'll need to be making. There are decisions that essentially happen the same way every year. Decisions around strategic planning, performance planning, budgets, those sorts of things. Then there are the decisions they face by responding to policy events. Every new administration comes in with a new agenda, and they'll have responsibility for responding to the White House requests for taking action on certain things. And then there are the unanticipated events, the crises, the natural disasters, the terrorist events that they'll be responsible for responding to. So in every single one of those instances, a senior federal official in government will need to have a good idea of how they want to make those decisions well, effectively, and efficiently.
Now, last November, you pulled together a bunch of federal officials, past and present, to talk about effective decision-making. What were some of the key takeaways?
Well, it was a robust conversation. We had current and former officials from the executive branch, the legislative branch. We had experts in the field of good government, and we learned a lot, to say the least. We learned that, too oftentimes administrations don't learn until late in their first administration that they need to put these decision frameworks into place. And so better to start early, even during the transition process, to determine how you want to make those sorts of decisions. The second is to figure out how you're going to gather the data and the multiple perspectives you need in order to make those decisions as effectively as is possible. There are so many different stakeholders in everything that the federal government does. So determining who you need to tap, how you're going to look at that information and make decisions is absolutely critical. And then last but not least is how are you going to use program evaluation data to make sure that you actually have a measure of what the outcomes are and whether you're having the intended results that the decision was after.
And Tom, they also recognize that some federal decision-making processes are broken and need revising. The list includes personnel, technology, and acquisition processes. I don't have to tell you, but a lot of this is rooted in legislation or the lack thereof. What should career executives do in the meantime? Do they bypass rules that don't work, wait for new ones? What?
Well, it's a great question. I think, both the folks in office right now in terms of the appointed officials as well as the career officials, it's good to make sure you have a solid understanding as to what the rules really are. I cannot tell you the number of agencies I've gone into where someone complains about a piece of legislation, a law, a regulation, that when you actually go to the source material, they discover that it's not there. It's an urban legend that's been handed down over time. And so I think for the current folks as well as the incoming folks, it's best to get all the facts out on the table as a starting point. And then I think you are right. There's a limited amount of action that's going to occur between now and the next administration. And so you're best to figure out how you can use those existing frameworks to get things done. And when needed, find workarounds that are legal and appropriate, but workarounds nonetheless.
And you also want leaders to take a big picture approach to decision making. As you just mentioned, data plays a central role. Here's a passage from your report. Agency leaders should also create a central data analytics capability to connect data and programmatic silos. Tom, would this be a new capability or is the foundation already in place?
Well, I think we're seeing the foundation being built in individual agencies. Big data is a trend that's affecting every sector of the economy, and the federal government is no exception to that rule. But the foundation is only being built, and I think what we talk about in the report is really an opportunity to take a look at things not just at an agency by agency level, which we're doing right now, but really looking at things government-wide, and how can we think about what we're tackling not as a group of individual agencies, but a collective really trying to get things done to the benefit of the country. And that will, I think, require a new capacity.
Here's something else. Speed is important here. New administrations have a lot of political capital right out of the gate. They just won an election. It's time to hit the ground running. So how can the next administration maximize that momentum? Well,
I think it really is around establishing some of these decision-making rules. When you think about everything that needs to happen, there is a lot of enthusiasm, there's a lot of excitement, but you can look at every single past administration and find either policy successes or policy failures that are oftentimes as a result of really poor decision making. And the reality is that a lot of the new incoming folks will have had some experience in managing large organizations. Some maybe even have some experience in the federal government, but many will not. And so really thinking through what and how you need to make those decisions will be vitally important if they want to maximize that opportunity and maintain the momentum for as long as is possible in our current sort of political climate.
It's good to have you on Government Matters. Tom Fox with the
Thank you.
Partnership for Public Service. Thanks.
Thank you, Morris.
And we'll turn from management to final matters straight ahead. The last woman featured on U.S. paper money was Martha Washington. She adorned the dollar-silver certificate from 1891 to 1896. Now U.S. currency is poised for another historic redesign. Mary Bruce has more.
Step aside, Andrew Jackson. Harriet Tubman is headed for the $20 bill. The former slave and abolitionist ousting the former slave-owning president. And she's not alone. Suffragists and female civil rights leaders are also being added to the backs of the $5 and $10 bills. The sweeping changes are not what was originally expected. A woman was supposed to replace Alexander Hamilton as the face of the 10, but that all changed with this. The Broadway hit bearing his last name, bringing new popularity to the nation's first Treasury Secretary. And it turns out our current Treasury Secretary is a big fan of the founding father. Why keep Hamilton in place?
You know, Hamilton's always been one of my heroes, so you can't work in the Treasury Department without feeling like you stand on his shoulders.
Excitement pouring in from around the world, from fellow politicians, Hillary Clinton tweeting, "I can't think of a better choice for the 20. To celebrities, Steve Harvey writing, "I'm gonna need my pockets full of Tubmans." And while some are disappointed that a woman will not be front and center on the 10, the secretary says he chose the 20 instead with good reason.
It's the bill that people get in a money machine. It is a bill that is in some ways the most familiar bill now because of that.
Now, the new designs will be released in 2020, the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage, but officials here say it's too soon to know when the new bills will actually hit your wallet. Mary Bruce, ABC News, Washington.
And that's the latest from Washington. Thanks for being with us. I'm Morris Jones. We know your week is filled with other matters. Save this half hour for us.